Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here and talking about one of my favorite subjects. And so really why we're here today is to have a conversation about having conversations, which is kind of ironic, but money is the most difficult thing for people to talk about. So first of all, next slide. Okay. How do you even start a potentially emotional conversation with your loved ones? Like, where's the door? Where do I go through? What do I do? And more importantly, what if they don't want to talk to you about it? And sometimes there's a wall, and there's a high wall. And it's very startling and frustrating. So, there's a lot of issues around possibly having these conversations with your loved ones. And then really what we want to talk about is how can we all be better prepared and less anxious about the whole process. So just to give you some things to think about as we get started. So first of all, money equals emotions, absolutely, across the spectrum emotions. Happiness, sadness, frustration, anger, depression. It's very related to our emotions. So when you want to have conversations around money with your loved ones, it's a lot to consider, We'll discuss some of that soon too. Transition of roles. So you can imagine, and some of this is going to be about speaking to your elder parents, but it's also a presentation on basic communication skills. So you can take this and speak to anyone about it, your children, other people, but think of it as a transition of roles. And because money equals power in many circumstances, it's about trying to often shift the roles. And of course, people are often resistant to shifting. They're entrenched in their current role and they don't see anything past the way it is. So there's a little bit of friction around the possibility that I'm going to give up something in order for someone else to get something, especially on something that is so marked it with emotion, like money, in terms of how people see me, how I see people. So it's very much a transition of roles. It's a change in the status quo. And of course, again, a lot of people don't react well to any of those changes. But part of the transition is also to acknowledge the inevitability that there will, at some point in our lives, be a changing of the roles. And it's you're hoping it's kind of a gradual change rather than an abrupt change, but we don't always have control over that. Observation is just paying attention to what's happening around in terms of our lives, our loved ones' lives, and how, what are we seeing and what are we observing? So probably to get started, it's good to just kind of have a general sense of, here's what I see. Conversation, it's not an interview, it's not an intervention, it's not a directorial, it's a conversation. So if you keep thinking of it as a conversation, that will change your whole tone, possibly your demeanor. It'll really help you to put a filter over things and just conversation, and just slow things down and have a conversation. But of course, there are challenges, and we're going to talk about some of those challenges too. So the first thing is why? Why do I even want to go there? Why? What am I looking for? Why? So the first thing, I think, among many, is to offer your assistance and support to someone you love. Kids, parents, but it's really just reaching out and saying, I have this richness of wealth, business knowledge, wisdom, life skills. I want to help and support you. What you want to do is also, through the why, is to reassure them that, things will be better, things can improve, and give them some peace of mind about it, because often the reason we do reach out is because they're sometimes in a state of panic or fear. So you want to reassure them. It's all about developing trust or strengthening the trust, offering comfort and confidence. And that goes both ways. If my loved one is feeling better, I'm going to feel better. I'm going to be more confident about my future because their future is more comfortable for them. And it's always about maximizing their independence, and maybe potentially yours too, but maximizing their independence. So you don't want to create a dependency if you can help it. And some things logistically may create that dependency, but you really want to help them to maintain their independence, give them control over their financial lives, or indeed any part of their lives, and also offer them choices. So that's part of the reason why you may need to have this conversation, is to introduce some of those solutions, which the solutions will optimize their strengths and compensate for their weaknesses. So if they're already doing this part really well, then, great. If they need help over here because they're not doing it so well, that's where you may, have some assistance and comfort to them. So it's, again, observing, everything and saying, okay, this area, no, but this area, yes. You want to honor and respect their wishes. And I think that's the overwhelming sense that you want to offer to them, is that I'm not trying to take away something from you. I'm trying to help you achieve your wishes, your goals, your priorities, and your values. So it's very much again, a position of honor and respect. The reason I want to help is because I love you, I honor you, I respect you. And part of the reason that you're looking at doing it is to minimize or prevent unpleasantness and chaos. So if you have a slow run at it, that you can kind of, get things in place as you go along. Other times it's like, yikes, we have to put out a fire. So the more that you can kind of get under your belt, so to speak, before any fires come your way, is better, I think, for everyone. And it's really, again, you're doing it because you want to protect them, I suppose, in a way, from unpleasantness and chaos. Sometimes they're resistant to that. Again, back to the control thing, right? Who would you want to speak to about these things? Well, parents, yes. If you're a certain age and your parents are elderly, then that can be a constant worry. Many of you are in a sandwich generation where, yes, you have older parents, but you also have children that are also going through some life stuff, financially or not financially, but so you're in that sandwich. Adult children, small children. Sometimes we have to have these conversations with our spouses and partners, and just, I'll give you some examples later, but it's really, those hard decisions or hard discussions about, I really want to do this, but I can't find the right time to say it, or the right. So hopefully we'll give you some skills around that. Advisors, which is kind of maybe weird, but again, sometimes we need to speak to a lawyer, an accountant, a tax preparer, CRA, in those types of conversations, which can be intimidating to us, then maybe we need to, kind of hone our skills so that we can have a more comfortable conversation with those potential our advisors. If you're either an employer or an employee, sometimes you have to have conversations about payroll, work schedules, time off, sickness. And if you kind of, again, embrace some of these skills, I think those conversations will be easier too. So it's not just about money conversations, about really any conversations, but of course, predominantly we'll talk about money. So when do you do this? Well, first of all, do it now, well in advance of any crises, any fires coming at you. But also, do it now. It's kind of, if you can start doing it now, mutually agreed time with lots of notice. So it's not, okay, in 5 minutes, we're going to talk about it. It's very much, let's plan ahead. And those of you that know me, I'm a planner, of course, and many of you are probably planners too. It's to find a time that works for everyone, but to give them a little bit of a runway to get used to it, to ease into it, and not have it sprung upon them when people aren't maybe at their best. Mutually agreed time, lots of notice, but you can also watch for opportunities to discuss. So let's say you're talking to someone, let's say a parent, and they say, oh, my next door neighbor passed away. And then you start talking about it, as you do with parents. And maybe there'd be an opportunity to say, well, what do you feel about this for you? And so those kind of opportunities, just be attuned to them, because rather than waiting till next Tuesday at 3 o'clock when you said you were going to discuss it, maybe there's an opportunity in advance to have some chat around it. You want to allow everyone time to prepare and practice. So much like this presentation today, I've prepared, I've practiced. You might want to have a little bit of that in your conversation with your person, to allow them time to get used to the idea, think about what they want to say, maybe even rehearse what they're going to say. choose a relaxed and unstressed time. Okay, so most of these conversations are not around the family dinner table when everyone's kind of chilling out and, celebrating. Probably not a good time to do that. Relaxed, unstressed, meaning that, middle of the day, you're not rushing off to another appointment or something. It's very chill. And that just kind of sets the stage, right? Compensate timing for energy levels and health challenges. Again, as we get older, of course, there's probably going to be more of that around our parents, but I mean, young kids can have that, or our adult kids, or ourselves. So adjust that, if you're a morning person, then don't have an evening conversation about it. Have it when your energy levels are high. Try and compensate for health challenges, particularly, people that have maybe sight impairment or hearing impairment. There may be, some environmental factors to take into place for that. Set a time limit. You don't want this to go on and on and on. It's maybe an hour, but you want to set that in advance and just say, do you have an hour? And then, pay attention to that, because, people have made other plans possibly, but also because if it's an uncomfortable subject, really, do you want to talk about it for more than an hour? Realize this is a process, not a one and done. This is not just a marathon, it's a series possibly of marathons. So you get one thing done and then, okay, another thing. So you're kind of building to a solution, and it may take time. So allow yourself and your person the time. Where do you want to have this conversation? So again, mutually agreed location and non-emotional location. So I'm thinking neutral ground. You don't want to have a conversation with someone, in their home where they're comfortable, and now you're kind of rocking their world, and they're kind of getting a little concerned about, okay, are they talking about me leaving my home, or someone coming into my home who's a stranger? Or so there's a lot of emotions if you're meeting in too comfortable of an environment, or just an emotional environment is what I mean. If you're talking about, a cottage, the family cottage, and some decisions have to be made, then maybe you don't want to hold the meeting while you're at the cottage. But agree to where to have it. But that said, try and not, if you're in a coffee shop, for example, or in a restaurant, try not to, go to a place where there's loud music or a lot of people, because again, that's distracting. And think if you're talking to a teenager about money, and they've got their phone in one hand and they're watching, videos over there, and there's a lot of kerfuffle in the house, they're not going to pay attention to you. Not that they may do anyway, but they'll pay less attention to you if there's a distraction. So plan for somewhere where there's less noise. And of course, for hearing impaired people, that's going to be an issue anyway, but less noise and temperature, because the more distractions they are, people are going to be a little twitchy, and they're not going to pay as much attention to you as you would like. So try that. Private and comfortable. You probably don't want to be that set if you're in a coffee shop. You don't want to be sitting next door to your neighbor who's all of a sudden listening to you. And you want to be comfortable. Don't go somewhere where, you're going to be falling off the chair or sliding off the stool or something. Just make sure you maybe scope in advance to find a comfortable environment. Of course, no crowds, because no crowds, when you're talking about a private matter, personal matter, it's kind of, you're just not sure who's there, who's listening. So something else to think about. So when would you do this? Okay, as I mentioned, oops, I'm going backwards. How you would do this? Okay, so you want to speak in simple, non-emotional language. You don't want to use words like I hate it, I love it, just kind of keep it neutral. And by simple, I mean using simple language. Like if you're discussing their finances, you don't need to get into, the I don't know, inflation talk or something, just simple language. And it's not that you're trying to dumb it down. I mean, that would be disrespectful probably right there. It's to kind of make it so that it's easily understood, and it's a common language rather than a lingo or an acronym or something. It's just simple, and there's no feelings around it. You're not having to say, like I say, I love it, I hate it. So that's a good one too. Keep it clear and concise rather than general and broad. If it's too general, then you tend to get off topic. Like if you're there to talk about, someone needs to help mom shovel her driveway, and then you start talking about well, someday when you move, yeah, you're jumping a little too far ahead. Make sure you stick to the topic, make it clear and concise. I'm here to talk about this. And I'm finished talking about that. Okay, let's talk about the grandkids, or let's talk about your neighbors, or whatever you end up talking about. But don't make it too loose. Try and keep to the subject. Seek clarification and knowledge using open-ended questions. So rather than saying, so do you want to leave your home? Yes or no? How do you feel about the eventuality of leaving your home? How would you feel if, I gave you some money to help you with this, but so ask more about how they feel about it rather than yes or no answers, because yes or no doesn't advance the conversation. So it's more about you getting some clarification and knowledge about asking around it, and giving them the opportunity to express themselves. Active listening is really about, speaking and then being quiet and waiting for them to answer you. Our tendencies tend to be in this quick paced world, and it's been 10 seconds, is very much about you are already thinking about your answer before you finished saying what you're saying, because you're saying, okay, I'll say this, and then now I'm going to say this. But really, it's important to kind of say it, zip, and listen to what they're going to say back to you. So it's a sign of respect, of course, but it's also then an opportunity to hear what they're saying and then ask for further feedback. So that's the way to move the conversation along. Inactive listening, I guess, is the opposite, is where you are totally in control. You're taking control of the conversation. You're moving it along at your pace, and you're so busy thinking about what you need to say that you're not hearing what the other person is saying. You may need to write out your questions in advance. I often do, and just kind of keep track of, oh yeah, well, when I ask this, and then I should ask that too. And keep an eye on the desired outcomes. Again, there's no sense in talking about this thing over here if you're really there to talk about this. So again, it kind of keeps you to script. And encourage the other person maybe to come to your mutually agreed meeting at your mutually agreed location to have some questions written out on their behalf, and they may want to take it to a different area, which is still equally interesting and helps move the process along, but maybe you hadn't thought about that question. So it's a good sharing of the opportunity. Be conscious of their fearfulness. So often, and again, thinking of elderly parents, often the reason they don't want to speak to you is because they are, or because they're hesitant, is because they are fearful that they will feel diminished. Their role as the head of the family potentially will be diminished, but also they're fearful because they think you're going to take their money. And it's a real fear. They hear it from their friends, they hear it in the media about seniors being scammed and family members taking their money. So really you want to reassure them you're not there for that. You're not concerned, or you're concerned, but you're not going to do that. And just be conscious of why they're hesitant, and often it comes from their place of fear. You want to also avoid embarrassing them and judging them. So it's often easy for us to jump to that place because we're thinking, okay, well, I wouldn't do that, so why are you doing that? So trying instead of trying to put yourself in their place, be very sympathetic on how they got there and possibly why they're doing those things. So avoid embarrassing them and avoid passing judgment. Just because you wouldn't do it and you wouldn't find yourself potentially in that situation currently doesn't mean that you need to reflect that back to them. No blame, no shame, because again, that doesn't move a conversation forward, a good conversation forward. Avoid a quick diagnosis. So just because, for example, you're visiting your parents and you open the fridge and you go, there's no food in here. Oh my God. And you start to catastrophize. But what you don't realize is they were going to do the groceries 2 hours later after you left, right? So make sure that you're not quickly jumping to a diagnosis, and be open-minded and go back to that observation part and just gather much more information. A big one is park your ego. And that's where, we kind of bluster in as children, adult children, or parents even, and think that we know it all and feel that, do what I do. And here's what I say. And let me control this for you. Let me take care of this for you. It then becomes all about you and not about your loved one. So park your ego at the door. It's not usually a good part of a conversation when someone feels that, oh boy, there they go. Park your ego. But also look for points of agreement. And that can be part of those open-ended questions. When someone gives you back their answer, you go, I agree with that. That is a great point. And that also kind of lifts the level of the confidence in the conversation and the comfort in the conversation. So always look for points of agreement. And if you can't, I mean, there's got to be something. The sky is blue. Yes, it is. You may disagree on a lot of other things, but so always look for a point of agreement. Know your audience and respect their privacy. So again, it's who you're speaking to. So, as an adult, sometimes I look at a young adult and I go, wow, they do things so totally different. But I don't know how they're doing it differently, or even all the things that they're doing differently. And that's kind of the same with our parents, is that, why do they feel that way? Well, because they came through a couple of wars, maybe depression for older parents. They came through, a lot of women particularly didn't work they were raising children at home, different roles, different learnings from their parents, if they learned anything about money. So just really put yourself in their shoes, put yourself in their shoes and imagine that, wow, this world must look really weird for someone who's, older. And also it's just kind of the same weirdness that the younger world looks to me. So really respect their privacy around it, and just, try not to dig too much into it, because that's where the barriers will come up. And then again, that kind of shuts down the conversation. Keep your eyes on the big picture. So, if their house is a little messy, let it be messy, but know that they're happy and healthy. If your kids are happy and healthy, maybe then, like big picture, right? You don't need to micromanage everything. And again, that goes back to, it then becomes more about you than them. Ask them what their thoughts are. What do you think about this? What do you suggest is the solution? And it really kind of engage them in the conversation. Maybe a lot harder with younger people, I have to say, but still, you can still ask them those questions. Focus on the essentials. Here's why we're here. Stay on track. When there's multiple siblings in the family, don't have, 6 people coming to mom and talking to mom about, so when are you moving? When are you giving up your car? When are you doing this? When are you doing that? Nominate someone to be the spokesperson. This person would probably be the one that mom or dad have the best communication with, the most regular communication with, because it's then already easier for them to talk to. But that one person then maybe wants to have, a summary of what all the other issues are that other people see, and keep them in the loop after she has a conversation with the parent. But same thing for kids. I mean, that you treat your own kids separately. So, if they have any issues, you don't want to hear from, all 6 of them at the same time. It's just, whoa, it's too overwhelming. So one person, one-on-one, 1-on-2, if you have 2 parents, if you're fortunate enough to have both parents, then someone has to be the spokesperson, but make sure everyone else is in the loop. And of course, seek professional advice as needed. Some of the items that may come up are just obviously going to be out of your scope of experience and knowledge. So there's going to be questions you might want to speak to an accountant, a lawyer, a tax advisor, a banker, a real estate agent. There's lots of people that you may need to reach out for. So just be open to that. You are not kind of a one-stop shop that can do all of that. At the same time, acknowledging the changing roles. So again, it's not that you want to diminish your parent or even your kid. It's that, as your kid grows up and takes on more responsibilities, your parent probably takes on less responsibilities. So, can you be the do-it-all person? Probably not. Can you fill certain gaps? Yes, you can. Maybe by bringing in other people to help, but don't take it all on yourself, because it's too much. It's exhausting. But acknowledge that the roles are changing. And, if your parent is open to that, where, you want to help them, then they'll allow the help, but realize that there is that shift in dynamics, and it's sometimes uncomfortable for a while. So that's where this is, a series of steps until people kind of get, okay, I got used to that change. What's the next change? but they can't make 100 changes at a time. It's too much to ask of ourselves and our parents and our kids. So here's some helpful conversation starters. So again, looking for those open-ended conversations. I want to make sure we're on the same page about. I found some interesting studies on how this can improve whatever. How do you think we could improve? What are your thoughts about? I've noticed we have a habit of, can we sit down and talk about? So those are good in you can imagine a lot of conversations, kids, parents, employees, employers. It's not just about money even. So let's say here's maybe a tip about, I want to move my screen out of here. It's not just about money, but I'm trying to keep it a little more related to money. So a good way to do it is to put yourself as the subject. So I've done this. What do you think? I just got my legal affairs in place, and I'm wondering if you've done the same. It might be helpful for me to know how to contact your executor or power of attorneys if the need arises. So it's not that you're kind of bluntly asking them, so who's your power of attorney? You're saying, I've done this, and I'm just kind of curious about, have you got this, and who should I contact if the need arises? So it's an easy way to ease into the conversation. So here's some other ones. I want to talk to you about something. I care about you, so I want to ask about this. To help you, to support you. Maybe I can order your groceries online, for example. Does your bank know who to contact if they can't reach you? To help you stay longer in your home. Hello, ding, ding. This is what they probably want. Have you considered a cleaning service? I use one myself, and it's super helpful. Your new phone has caller ID, so you know who is calling. And this is where you have the conversation about financial scammers, and and educate them about, not everybody who calls has good intentions, and some of them will try and scam you from some of your money. So maybe have that conversation. Let's plan together on how to make sure you can get to church or shopping, etc. Transportation, of course, is a big independence thing for many people, kids and seniors alike. So how can we have a plan that, okay, I'll do it this day, someone else will do it that day, I'll call an Uber for you this day. And just, those are the things that help them to maintain their independence and feel that they have, that they're still valid, I suppose. Have you considered what will happen with the cottage when you are gone? Can we discuss what each of us kids feel about it? I have to say, in my experience, the cottage is often a big estate planning red flag, because the parents look at the cottage as kind of a culmination of all their kids' history, family celebrations and memories. And the last thing they want to do is say to their kids, yeah, we're selling it. So they then plan to leave it to their kids. What happens is the kids have, one kid is in one country, one kid is in a different province, one kid doesn't want to go to the cottage, especially when the kids realize that they now have to agree on everything and pay equal parts of everything. So that's a good conversation to have with older parents, is if there's a cottage involved, because the parents need to hear that, oh, you mean just I have 4 kids and only one of them is interested in the cottage, so maybe I'll think of doing something different. But you really need to have that conversation with them, because they think they're doing their best by just leaving it to the kids. Something else is, remember the challenges you had when grandma or grandpa fell ill quickly and needed to move into care? Do you have plans? What are your plans? So it's making it relatable to them and making them, oh, you're right, I did have, it was quite a challenge. It was quite a waiting period, and it was quite expensive, and whatever that is. So they kind of start to accept that, at some point they may need that, and, how can they move that forward? Another one, for example, my best friend's parent just passed away, and my friend is super stressed because they never discussed the funeral arrangements or where the important papers are. I just wondered if you can share with me what your plans are, or if you already have something in place. I would feel much better knowing, so that your wishes will be respected. So again, good conversation starter. And just maybe a bit of an aside, when you're dealing with older parents, there's 2 ways to kind of deal with their financial matters. One of them is as a power of attorney. So you can be power of attorney to speak on their behalf and make transactions on their behalf with banks, financial institutions, insurance companies, that kind of thing. But you need to have that registered in advance with those institutions. So you can't just say, okay, you know, my parent got ill yesterday, I'm here today to talk to them. They won't allow that. You need to put it in place while your parent is able to give their permission, their authorization for you to become their power of attorney. Which, you know, and you still have the copy that has your name on it and that kind of thing. A new thing that has come up is called a trusted contact person, TCP. And a lot of those same institutions will ask the client, who is your TCP? So it's different than a power of attorney. Power of attorney can help transactions if they have the legal authority to make changes. The trusted contact person is your insurance agent has been trying to reach you and they can't for whatever, you know, you're in the hospital, you're out of the country, you're somewhere south, whatever it looks like, or they're just calling at the wrong time. Then they would call the trusted contact person on file and say, hey, I've been trying to get in touch with Mrs. Smith. I can't find her. Could you give her a message for me? Or here's, you know, please have her call me as soon as possible, that kind of thing. So it has no power, no legal authority, but it is a secondary person for that, for the institution to call. Sometimes they can be two separate people. Sometimes they can be the same person, but just so you're aware of the TCP, banks, investment institutions, but still the power of attorney is still a standalone, or it can be combined with the TCP. Little off track. Parents, could you introduce me to your financial advisor or other professionals? I don't need to know anything about your specifics. That's not the reason, but it would be helpful to you if they know who I am for future reference. Because again, when you have to maybe step in as a power of attorney, then you're not going in cold. They know who you are, you know, and once you've been introduced to the parent, then maybe you go and sit in the waiting room while the parent is having the meeting. But then maybe the next meeting, you're in the meeting. So it's, again, baby steps to get you to your final outcome. So overall, for parents especially, it's just acknowledging the inevitability of the need for and the wisdom of transferring decision making and managing day-to-day responsibilities. So, you know, the parent has the overall stuff, but maybe you're the logistical person. You're making things easier for them to still, you know, maintain what they want to maintain. But there is that slight shift in some of the decision making. Discuss and establish ground rules of the potential circumstances or triggers that will affect the change of responsibility for key functions. So I don't know, think about driving. If you have an elderly parent that drives, you could say, okay, well, you know, after you have an accident, we're going to be discussing this again in case you need to stop driving, or if your capacity test has changed. So like, what is the trigger? You know, if you need to go in the hospital for 6 months, then, you know, those kind of things, but there should be a conversation about, at this point, I will take on more of those key functions. I'll do the day-to-day stuff because we've agreed, but at some point I may need to do more for you. And here's what the trigger might be. So again, that's very, proactive. It's not just wait for the fire to start. It's kind of like, okay, it's starting. Now we're ready for it. Now we can put those changes in place. Some of the things maybe to talk about with your spouse or partner. And like I say, a lot of these topics are still kind of, the skills are relatable to talking to your partner. Some of the ones that I hear are about retirement. So you could say to your partner, I'm not sure we can afford to retire when we want. Let's get back on track. So admittedly, maybe a little more difficult to have a conversation with a spouse or partner because you're living with them. But, you know, if you're, again, using some of those positive skills, then, you know, it's a collaboration. Let's get back on track together because we want to retire together. You know, we have this shared goal. Overspending, perhaps. I would sleep better knowing our finances are in order. Can we find a time to sit down and discuss? And again, that's not, you know, shaming or blaming or, you know, hopefully. So you're kind of, you know, it's a health concern possibly too. But can we sit down and discuss, and then do that, go back, find a time, find a locations, you know, and have those conversations, series of conversations. It's not again, a one and done. Children, some of them are adults, some of them aren't, but one of the ones that I see is around education. So there's many kids, rightly or wrongly, that assume that their parents will pay the full price of their post-secondary education. And yes, they have jobs, but yes, they spend all of their money. And unless you have a conversation, then they will, again, as they're growing up, or as they're old enough to understand, they may feel rightly that, okay, in absence of other information, I think my parents are going to pay for the whole thing. But maybe you want to say, let's talk about the various ways to pay for college or university, and set some expectations early on, not waiting till they're in grade 12, to have some conversation around their education costs. Like, we'll give you the car and pay for the tuition, but we're not paying for your room and board or something, but you need to initiate the conversation. Affordability, that happens at any age. Kids always want something. But you may want to say, we can look at the costs together and discuss where the money would come from, rather than I'm the ATM. I'm the one that's always providing the money. Let's have a conversation around it, because some of this also, especially with kids, is to start to build their financial confidence, their financial literacy, so they understand that possibly parents aren't always going to be there giving them money. They need to take some responsibility in it. They need to reflect on their own choices and the cost of those choices. So again, this is a key learning opportunity as well. I mean, it's going to be potentially different conversations with your kids than it would be with your parents or even your spouse. But I get excited talking about the kids, because it's a great opportunity to provide some of that financial literacy that unfortunately they're not learning in school, in many schools. So these are some good questions, or some good tips, I think. So some of the questions, and maybe Lana, I'll ask you also if there's any additional questions, but these are some of the questions that came up on the preview questions. So someone was asking me about helping their adult children with mortgage. And I think I don't like to see adults disadvantaged by children's decisions. It happens. It totally happens. If you have surplus, absolutely, then you're good. If it won't impact your financial future, if you've helped your kids and now you don't have enough to maybe live on your own in retirement, or you have to keep working into what you past where you thought you would retire, then they put that decision has put you at a disadvantage. So I think that's a conversation to have with your kids and say, okay, I've looked at my numbers. I've had someone else help me with my numbers, and here's how much I can give you. It's not a blank checkbook. It's a, this much. So again, only if helping them doesn't put you at a disadvantage. Of course, you want to have a legal agreement to keep everyone on board, because one kid could say, well, you gave this one this and you gave them this, and I'm at estate time or any other time, there's going to be some friction, lawyers involved, legalities and stuff. So it's very highly recommended that you have some type of promissory note maybe, or some type of legal agreement. And to have, again, the conversation well in advance. Of course, the kids, buying the house, have a time limit on it, on the payback, if there is a payback, but that could be in that legal agreement. And also, I think it's important in every level of kids, parents, to give a hand up and not a hand out. So be happy to help them and to encourage them, and maybe assist them in finding the right support or the right professional to speak to. But it's, I think, more meaningful to their financial responsibilities and literacy to give them a hand up and not a hand out. So I don't know if that totally answers the question from that person, but it was, they asked about, should they be a guarantor for the mortgage? Personally, what I would recommend is that they help the kids with the payments rather than giving them the money, because then, that you can end giving the money if you need to. It's hard when you're on the deed as a guarantor, but I know in today's circumstances too, that's sometimes the only way that adult kids can get into a home. You may want to have a mediator, like a third party, have the conversation with both sides to kind of iron it out. So hopefully that answers that question for them. And this is a common one, as when siblings are located around the world, how the heck do you have conversations when they're in different continents, different time zones? And I think I mentioned that a little bit earlier, is more about having a spokesperson, and the spokesperson from the siblings would probably be the one that was located close enough to the parent or in more frequent contact with the parent. And then just have kind of an offline meeting siblings to find out what their areas of concern are, and then funnel them through the spokesperson, realizing that they're kind of putting a lot on that one sibling to do the exploration and have the conversation. But I think that's really the only way and the best way to do it, because you don't want to have different points coming in to overwhelm the parent. So I think it's more have a committee in some way, and then have a spokesperson to be the bearer of information and the conveyor of information back to the siblings, and see if that can work for you. Another question that came in was about when adult kids overspend and owe you money. I think that's kind of related a little bit to the first one that I mentioned, is the hand up rather than the handout, and document if you're giving them money or providing money, document it, encourage them, of course, to repay you. It's not called the bank of mom and dad to an extent, right? But you want to enable them to make their own decisions, but not disable you with their decisions. So it's very much about having a clear channel of communication to say, I can help you to this level, but past that, it's causing harm to me financially, and I'm not okay with that. And have a little bit of a barrier. Again, give them some warning, give them a ramp that, okay, I'm just letting you know that in a couple months from now, I'm going to have a finite amount of money that I'm going to help you with. And I'll assist you in all these other manners that we spoke about. But I think it's important to have a clear plan and some clear communication around that. If you can in advance, but certainly have it so that it doesn't advance further is the other thing. And I think there's a question in here, Lana. So the question says, a lot of my comments can pertain to speaking to our parents. What if you're the parents wanting to prepare an adult child for taking over a bigger role? And that's absolutely a great question, especially if you're thinking finances or health, their health power of attorney. So I think it's very much it works both ways, right? You can say to your kids, come on over. I have something I want to discuss with you. You can make it so that, I've been speaking to my friend. They have their kid as the power of attorney. So how do you feel about being a power of attorney for us? How can we express our wishes so that you have a clear understanding of it? I think it's a good conversation to have. And usually the guideline is as parents get close to age 70, 75, they should be having that conversations with their kids. And sometimes, and I coach seniors, I've done a course before on this, where I've coached seniors on how to approach their kids. And a lot of it is, the same methodology. I've been thinking about this, and I'd like to share with you how you can help us when we need help. Same parameters. But, also realize, what I tell my clients too, is realize that not all your kids are cut out to be your power of attorney, whether it's for property or for healthcare. For property, you probably want the kid that's the smartest with business and their own finances, first of all. And for healthcare, you want someone who's maybe doesn't have to be smart about money, but certainly needs to be empathetic and sympathetic, and maybe somewhat both powers of attorneys need to be able to speak up on your behalf. So you don't want your most shy and timid child to be that person either. If they're under probably 40, I don't know that I would ask my child, because I don't know that they have enough life experience to be able to speak on my behalf, unless you have a really big window of communication with them where they're totally on side with what you want and all of that. But these things can work totally with adult children around that. I don't know if that answers your question, but I hope so. And Lana, I don't know. Whoops, Lana, I don't know if there's other questions. Hang on. I've lost my track here.
No problem. All right. Let me just double check. Does anybody else have any other questions for Janet today, about having difficult money conversations, either with, your parents, your friends, your spouse,
Any and
anybody?
all of the above.
Yeah. My spouse is on here today, and I'm sure he will have learned some information. I expect to get a conversation in the next week. So
Yeah, you might hear some familiar phrases.
well, I might. It's so true. All right, everyone. Thank you for coming to this part of the Canadian Money Saver webinar day in celebration of International Women's Day. I guess thank you again, Janet. I
Oh,
appreciate
I
it.
think someone's just raised their hand.
Oh, okay. Let's just see.
Is there's a new question. Excellent.
Yes.
Oh,
Go
a
ahead.
few questions.
Coming in now.
Excellent. Do you want me to read them out?
Yeah, go ahead with the one by Lisa.
Okay, so the audience is slightly stacked, I have to say. Some of my friends and family are on here.
Great, I love it.
Lisa, what resources are there for people who have a hard time saying no to their children? Yeah, it's tough, but no is a full sentence, as many of my friends will remind me. No is a full sentence, and I think it's very much an intention that you set. And I don't know that there's a resource as such. It's therapy possibly, right at the far end, but really have a good conversation and just say, here's how I can help you. Here's the level that I can help you with, and then past that, let me help you find some resources yourself to help me, with those things. But it's a challenge. I mean, it's challenged with parents that have 65-year-old kids, let alone, people that have younger adult kids. So I don't know if that helps, Lisa, but I'll keep my eye out for resources and let you know if I find any.